Let's go. Good morning, everybody. The Committee on Appropriations is called to order. Noting the absence of a quorum, we will begin as a subcommittee. Sergeants, if you could be so kind enough to please call the absent members. Good morning. Welcome, everybody, to the Appropriations Committee. We have a total of 65 measures before us. 37, or 33, I should say, are candidates for consent. 13 are candidates for suspense, and we have a total of 21 measures that are recommended for do pass as amended. Our workload today, in comparison to past appropriation meetings, is quite light. It's about 9:15 a.m. Again, I want to underscore to the sergeants to please call the absent members. We have one replacement today, Mr. Wesley Chesborough, who's replacing Mr. John Bettis, and we should be out of here maybe by 10:30. Oh, is it really? Okay. We just have an announcement. Mr. John Pettis actually will grace us with his presence today. So Mr. Chesborough will not be here, and Mr. John Pettis will be with us today. So we have Ms. Corbett. Senator Corbett, good morning. Senator Corbett, you have one measure before us today, which is a candidate for suspense. That is SB 140. I'm going to make the assumption that you would like to make a presentation on that measure. Okay, go right ahead. Oh, one more thing, Ms. Corbett. I just want to be remiss if I did not welcome the Vice Chair of the committee, Senator. How are you doing? Good morning. Good morning. All righty. Good morning, Senator. Go right ahead, Ms. Corbett. You want to hit your microphone? Try it again now.
1, 2, 3.
There we go.
Mr. Chair, I did also want to mention that the Pro Tem has asked me to present SB 798 as well.
789?
It says 798 on the front. It says 789 in the inside.
Okay.
You're right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members. Senate Bill 140 gives the Department of Food and Agriculture the authority to create a mandatory citrus nursery stock pest cleanliness program that will establish inspection requirements and testing standards. The bill will protect California nurseries from severe losses resulting from devastating diseases like citrus canker and greening, which unfortunately have been causing serious problems in other states. These diseases damage and kill citrus trees, reduce yields and quality, and increase costs for planting materials and regulatory compliance. As we all know, citrus is a very significant part of California's $23 billion agricultural industry. I've been working with stakeholders and the Department of Food and Agriculture to address issues surrounding the cost and implementation of the program. And I do understand that this bill is on suspense, but I think it's very important to mention that this bill will be entirely funded by industry, and hopefully that will be taken into consideration so that this bill can move successfully off suspense. The bill has received strong bipartisan support in both houses, and with me today to speak just briefly are Crystal Jack, with representing California Citrus Mutual, Robert Delazal with the California Association of Nurseries and Garden Centers, and Mary Helen Seeger with the Four Winds Nursery.
All right, please. Thank you. Supporters?
Mr. Chairman and members, my name is Robert Dolezal with the California Association of Nurseries and Garden Centers. We strongly urge your support of this bill. We'd like to see it come off of suspense. The bill is 100% funded by the industry on itself for the protection of its stock. With the citrus greening, HLB disease on our threshold, it's vitally important that the propagative material in the citrus nurseries be protected prior to the time that that disease arrives in the state. We already have the vector for the disease, Asian citrus psyllid, and this bill is a keystone to protecting the citrus industry. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. Next witness in support.
Yes, Mary Helen Seeger from Four Winds Growers, and my family and I own a citrus nursery, and we, as well as many other citrus nurseries, are in strong support of the bill and want to reiterate that this is industry funded and has had a lot of support for this bill that has the propagation stock protected.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Mr. Chair and members, Crystal Jack on behalf of California Citrus Mutual. We are in support of this industry-funded bill.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Seeing none, any witnesses in opposition? Also seeing none, DOF, do you have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Rob Schladel with the Department of Finance. We agree that the bill would be covered by fees and that it's sponsored by industry, and we have no concerns.
All right, thank you very much. Senator, please go ahead.
Have you ever examined some kind of constraints on the department from imposing fees? In other words, cover the cost of the program. This is typical in government, and I'm not raising the issue just specific to this, but it's all kinds of fees. But could we have any language in there that would limit them and justify their costs in some way?
I would be glad to work with you on any such language, Senator Nielsen. I really don't know specifically what you're proposing, but I'd be glad to talk to you about it.
Well, we can discuss it. We don't have the time to come up with that today, but if I may discuss with staff, it's a more general to prospective kinds of fee impositions, and I don't think I necessarily, other than rhetorically, raise it here today, but I think it's something the committee needs to pay attention to, that agencies historically have taken great liberties with what their costs are applied to the fees imposed on various and sundry industries. I'd just like to examine that. So it's just an issue that came to mind, Senator. I would move the bill.
Thank you very much. I think it's very appropriate. We'll be glad to talk to you about that.
Thank you, Senator. This is a candidate for suspense. I have something a little similar dealing with the citrus industry that was a candidate for suspense also too, as a industry fee supported measure. We will work closely with you as well as your sponsors, Senator. I don't want to tip my hand obviously, but we will work closely with all of you. Why don't we go to the next measure? Thank you for your testimony on this measure. Thank you for your witnesses.
Thank you very much.
Let's go to SB 789, Senator Pro Tem Darrell Steinberg's card check for farm workers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
And this is a recommended due pass.
Thank you very much. Very proud to be able to present this bill
Senator,
for the
just
pro tem.
one quick second. I just want to, for the record, we have a motion. It's been made by Mr. Amiano. It's been seconded by Mr. Solario. Please proceed with your testimony.
Senate Bill 789 is both one of the simplest and one of the most important measures the legislature will contemplate this year. Back in March, we honored a man who fought and toiled for the rights and respect for arguably the hardest working souls in California. Senate Bill 780 allows these hardest working individuals in California the right to organize themselves within a union in a streamlined manner. SB 789 permits agriculture employees to select their labor representatives by submitting a petition to the Agricultural Labor Relations Board along with representation cards signed by a majority of the bargaining unit. I could speak longer on the bill, but I do know we have a motion and a second. It's an extremely important bill, and as you know, this bill will also reduce costs, so we appreciate your positive support on this measure.
Thank you very much, Ms. Corbett. Any witnesses in support?
Esperanza Ross on behalf of United Farm Workers in support.
Nicole Wertelman on behalf of the City and County of San Francisco in support.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Seeing none witnesses in opposition, and we'll get to our senator very shortly. Let's go with the witnesses in opposition.
Crystal Jack on behalf of the Nisei Farmers League, the California Grape and Tree Fruit League, and California Citrus Mutual in opposition.
Good morning. Barry Bedwell, President of the California Grape and Tree Fruit League. I would just like to say that we are part of a coalition that rises in strong opposition to this particular piece of legislation. It's the third year in a row that we've been here, and really what we're talking about is the fundamental cornerstone of democracy, that being the secret ballot. There is no question that this piece of legislation would remove that absolute right to a secret ballot and in essence become a government-supervised program for union membership. In terms of fiscal impact, I think at a time when this state and the country are going through such challenges with a recession, to push this legislation in terms of fiscal responsibility is irresponsible. So I would just like to reiterate our continued opposition to SB 789.
Thank you very much. Next witness in opposition.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Little with the California Farm Bureau Federation, also in opposition. I'd like to identify myself with Mr. Bedwell's remarks. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, we have a question or commentary from Senator Nielsen.
If I may, Senator Corbett, the lady who represents the United Farm Workers, my recollection may be impaired, but it seems to me in the early years of the Appropriations Act and the union movement that UFW had opposed card check. Isn't that correct? Opposed card check?
I don't have that same recollection. But if so, since that time, things have evolved as it relates to fair and free elections.
Yeah.
So,
I do appreciate that times evolve, but it was my recollection, having been a part of this debate for many decades,
Right.
that was an early on position.
and we have a number of cases that we could provide you, Assembly Member, of all of the cases that we believe have been wrought with fraud, as well as all of the cases that the ALRB has found wrongdoing more recently in the last couple of years, as wrongdoing on part of the employer
But it
as it
is
relates
all-
to the elections.
Excuse me. Go ahead,
Yeah.
please. I'm sorry. Well, I'm familiar with it. I did serve a year on the Agricultural Labor Relations Board, and there is an adjudicatory process for unfair labor practices. That's one of the major responsibilities. Can't these issues be handled through the normal ULP process?
We don't think so. We have a case in particular, the Giamara case. The election was held a couple years ago where we had 75% of the workers going in support of a collective bargaining unit. And it's only 7 days later after the election was triggered, 45% were in support. And there was actually a joint committee that looked into that, as well as the ALRB found wrongdoing. So we think that there's a number of those cases before us that we could share with you as evidence, as well as the fact that out of the 95% of the cases brought before the ALRB, there has been wrongdoing shown on part of the employer's actions. So,
Well, how many of these elections has the ALRB overturned based on ULPs?
well, that's a different issue, but I think we're exploring that now in a different committee this morning.
Okay, well, I would argue that there's already a means to lodge complaints and to raise objections to the results of elections. And the card check, frankly and historically, it's a broader issue than just agricultural labor. I think that this is a very dangerous precedent, and we just generally as a society ought not go there.
And just to add to this, I know that Mr. Bedwell had brought this up on the secret ballot. This does not take away the current system. It's only providing another option. So we do not do away with the secret ballot election.
No, you don't do away with it, but it would not become a preferred or practiced option. The card check would become the deal. And I think that you've...
That would be up to the worker's choice.
Well, the salient point, though, I think the original union movement was predicated on the secret ballot. And I think that is secret, sacred, and absolutely settled in law and in practice in America. And that's just exactly where we ought to stay, secret ballot. This is not a secret ballot. Individuals can be coerced into signing something. They don't know what they're signing. There can be all kinds of fraud. In fact, I would say this opens the collective bargaining system up to vastly more opportunities for fraud than exists today. And I would like, Mr. Chairman, too, to get the comments from Finance at the end, if we may.
Ms. Ross, why don't we hold on one second, because I want to hold
Please respond,
back.
and I have no other questions.
Hold on one second. You can respond. I'll give you an opportunity to respond, but what I don't want is a colloquy right now. Why don't we go with Mr. Solorio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to thank Senator Corbett, as well as the author, Senator President Pro Tem, for bringing this important piece of legislation forward. I'm very supportive of this legislation. I think it's long overdue. The other thing that I think is important to mention, because I don't think it's been mentioned, at the federal level there are some card check proposals, but they don't include the provisions for farm workers.
Right.
So that's the reason why we do need to act here in California, and I think this is the vehicle to do that on behalf of farm workers here in our state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Assemblymember Solario, the main reason this bill is being brought is to make sure that these protections are fair for everyone and that we're on an even playing field. I don't question the sincerity of folks that are concerned about secret ballot, but we can't always assume that the way things are conducted now ensure fairness for all, and that's what this is about. We wouldn't be here today if we didn't believe that the process couldn't be improved upon and be made more fair for all.
Why don't we go to Mr. John Pettis?
Well, I, too, wanted to thank the author. I think this is a wonderful piece of legislation. I think that it really does speak to a changing dynamic in the workplace and assures that democracy is really carried out. It's a pathway to expedite democracy, not an affront to it. And I thank President Pro Tem Steinberg for bringing this forward, and I thank you for presenting it on his behalf.
All right, thank you. Ms. Harkey.
We're on line here. I just have one comment. I kind of view this as almost like when, you know, you have all these petitions for things to go on the ballot, and people are hitting you outside the shopping center, and they say, well, it's okay, you can sign this now because it's going to bring it to people for a vote. And this kind of circumvents that process where people might sign the petition under some kind of, who knows, maybe they want to get along. So they sign it and just kind of go on, and then now they don't have to vote. So it really, I don't see this as a viable option for the two choice, where you get to sign, but then you also get your private choice to go in the ballot box and vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We've had witnesses in support. We've also have witnesses in opposition. Department of Finance, do you have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have an opposed position on this bill. Cost would be approximately $15,000 per case if additional unfair labor practices have to be investigated by the board.
Thank you very much. It's my understanding right now we still don't have a quorum right now. We're one short. I'm going to ask again the sergeants if you could be so kind enough to call the absent members. I know we have a lot of members with many committees on the Senate side right now. Senator Corbett, I just want you to know that I'm in strong support of this measure.
Thank you very much.
Senator Alex Padilla, who's present with us today, carried this measure in 2007. And we're talking about 400,000 farm workers who are the salt of the earth, who every day are part of the world's most sophisticated agricultural industry. And I've always been a very strong supporter of the agribusiness, too, in the state of California. And I believe I was just told we have a quorum, too, right now. So just a couple things to underscore is this does not guarantee unionization at all whatsoever. And the so-called free market of ideas, people should have choice. And I know yesterday we had a very polemic and polarizing measure from the Senate, and that was the word or the descriptive word of the day was the issue of choice. So I know that in this case it provides choice. It's either the farm workers are going to decide if they want to be part of a union or if they don't want to be part of a union. So you want to make the opportunities as abundant as possible. So we have a motion, I believe, by Mr. Amiano. It's been seconded by Mr. Solorio. This measure passes. We do have a quorum. This measure passes. Let's call the roll. Let's first, before we do that, before we go to a final vote on this measure, let's do a roll call.
De Leon?
Present.
Nielsen? Present. Amiano? Calderon? Cotto?
This is just a roll call.
Davis? Duvall? Fuentes? Hall? Harkey? Miller? John Perez? Skinner? Solario? Strickland? Torlixson?
Okay. Members, we have a quorum that's been established. We don't want to lose anyone for right now, so this measure passes. Senator Corbett on a B roll call.
Thank you very much,
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair and members.
Senator Alex Padilla. Buenos dias. Good morning, Senator Padilla. You have two measures before us today. One is a candidate for suspense, that is SB 682, and you have one that is a due pass recommendation, SB 475.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Let me just begin by waiving presentation on SB 682.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Suspense, and only present SB 475, which simply would allow the California State Board of Guide Dogs for the Blind to raise the current fee cap that's been in place since 1994. Since 1994, we've seen the workload at the board double, and the budget office of the Department of Consumer Affairs now projects a deficiency in the fund by fiscal year 2012-2013.
Senator, just one quick second. We have a motion that's been made by Mr. John Bettis, and it's been seconded by Mr. Almiano.
Okay, thank you for the motion. The second, we believe this raising of the cap is necessary for the board to continue to conduct its critical licensing functions. Specifically, it raises the cap from 0.004 to 0.005. And is sponsored by the by the board and supported by the Council of the Blind, Guide Dog Users, as well as Guide Dogs of America Training School. It's been pretty much unanimous votes the whole way. Would ask for your aye vote.
Thank you very much, Senator. Witnesses in support.
Good morning, committee members. My name is Antoinette.
Why don't you hit your button? There you go. One more time. There we go.
Good morning, committee members. My name is Antoinette Sorek, and I am Executive Officer with the State Board of Guide Dogs for the Blind. And I'm here today in support of the board-sponsored bill, which will sustain the fiscal health of the board. As Senator Padilla mentioned, this bill is supported by Guide Dogs of America, the California Council of the Blind, Guide Dog Users of California, as well as the California Veterinary Medical Board. By supporting this bill, you can help maintain licensing of guide dog schools and standards of training and care for guide dogs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next witness in support.
I'm Frank Welty from the California Council of the Blind and the Guide Dog Users of California, and we are in support of the bill.
Thank you very much. Next witness. Okay. Witnesses in opposition. Seeing none, DOF, do you have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We're neutral on this bill, and we concur that the fee increase would offset an operating deficit.
Thank you very much. Seeing no questions from the members, we have a motion that's been made by Mr. John Bettis. It's been seconded by Mr. Almiano. This measure passes. Mr. Padilla, on an A roll call.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Samedian, come on down. Senator Samedian is taking the long route. You have three bills before us today. One is a candidate for suspense, Senator. One is a candidate for consent file, and one is a due pass. That'd be SB 159.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, I'll say thank you for the SB 614 and its consent. I'll waive presentation on SB 317 if that's agreeable to you, sir.
Yes, sir.
And then I will go straight to SB 159.
Thank you, Senator.
Members, this is a common sense traffic safety measure. Passed it a few years ago with a sunset bill in it, sunset provision in the bill, just to make sure that there were no unintended consequences. That wasn't part of the request of the CHP. It is a move over, slow down bill. In the intervening years, seems to have worked just fine. There have been no problems with the bill. CHP is comfortable with the bill as it stands. It's now the law in more than 40 other states, so it simply conforms our practice to what happens in other parts.
Fantastic, Senator. We have a motion that's been made by Mr. John Pettis, has been seconded by Ms. Skinner. Do you have any witnesses in support? Seeing none. Any witnesses in opposition? Also seeing none. Do you have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we're neutral. We have no cost associated.
Thank you very much. Since we have a motion as well as a second, this is a very good bill. I carried a similar measure. We've had Caltrans workers have lost their lives because folks simply don't move over to the next lane when they see these precautionary lights. This measure passes on an A roll call. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
Senator Denham. Senator Denham, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
You have two measures before us today. One is a consent and one is a due pass urgency for one of your school districts. So that would be SB 130.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I've got several different witnesses with me here today, but let me just briefly explain to you the situation with King City Unified School District. This is a situation where a school district is on the verge of bankruptcy, if not bankruptcy already today. Everything from a PERB decision to high contracts that they've had for several years now have caused the district to go into bankruptcy. What we're looking to do here is a loan from the iBank, which will actually put the FCMAT team in place, able to come in, provide some fiscal responsibility, renegotiate some of the contracts, and a long-term loan that will help them to get out of this current situation. The County of Monterey has already provided a loan which they can no longer distribute any more funds. So the only alternative at this point would be a complete bankruptcy, which, as you all know, is a situation that the courts have decided can't be done. So with that, I have several witnesses here with me today. And
thank you, Senator. The witness in support.
In support, I'm Nancy Katowski, Monterey County Superintendent of Schools, and I'm in support of the bill.
Thank you, Superintendent. Next witness in support.
Gary Bossum, Associate Superintendent, Monterey County Office of Education, support the bill.
Thank you very much.
Tony Triguero on behalf of the California Teachers Association. We're in support.
Thank you very much. Any other witnesses in support? Seeing none, any witnesses in opposition? Also seeing none, do we have any questions from the members themselves? Seeing no questions from the members, we have a motion that's been made by Senator Nilsen. Do we have a second? We got a second by, I heard it over here, by Mr. Isidore Hall. Let's do a Republican roll call.
Nielsen?
Aye.
Nielsen, aye. Duval? Harkey? Miller? Strickland?
All right, thank you very much. This is a bridge loan you can secure that loan from the iBank itself. This is Ms. Ana Caballeros, District 2. Your measure passes, Mr. Denham. Thank you very much.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
The Senator from Orange County, Mr. Luke Correa. Mr. Correa, you have 6 measures before us today. 2 are recommended to pass, 4 on consent, SB 91 and SB 549.
I'll waive presentation on the 4 consent items, and I'll briefly present on 549 and 91.
All right, please proceed.
Start with item number 1. This is essentially extends the sunset date for the senior citizen personal income tax checkoff from 2010 to 2015.
Thank you very much, Senator. Any witnesses in support? Seeing none. Witnesses in opposition? Also seeing none. DOF, do you have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have an estimate of a loss of $15,000 per year from the Franchise Tax Board for personal income taxes.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have a motion as well as a second? We have a motion made by Mr. Hall. It is second by Mr. John Perez, or at least I took the itch to the head. Okay, that's a second right there.
I'll do that for a second. Just don't do that in an auction to me.
We have a question? Yes, we have a question from Ms. Harkey.
Will you add a co-author?
I would be honored to have you as a co-author. And Mr. Duval, you would like to be a co-author as well? Thank you.
That's called Orange County love right there, Mr. Correa.
Orange County love.
Right there.
Sweetest love there is, sir.
Yes. The citrus love. 91. No. This measure passes in a roll call.
Thank you.
Let's proceed to SB 549.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This bill authorizes the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology to collect language, ethnicity, and gender data from new applicants and renewal licensees.
Thank you very much, Mr. Correa. Witness in support.
Leilani Aguinaldo-Yi with Asian Americans for Civil Rights and Equality. We are the co-sponsors for SB 549. Lack of access to information in a language that workers and owners can understand prevents these workers from being fully informed about workplace health and safety. Strongly urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other witnesses in support? Seeing none. Witnesses in opposition? Also seeing none. DOF, do you have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have one-time costs of $36,000 and annual costs of $10,000.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have a motion as well as a second? I see a motion by Mr. John Perez. We have a second by Mr. Joe Cotto. This measure passes on a B roll call. Mr. Correa.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Sergeants, if you could please call some authors. We need some authors. If we can call Senator Anistad, Senator Alquist, Senator Ducheney, Senator Hancock, Senator Kehoe, Senator Lowenthal, Senators Maldonado, Pavley, Wiggins, and Yee. If the television sets are on in their offices, if you could please come on down to 4202. Again, that's Senators Anistad, Alquist, Ducheney, Hancock, Kehoe, Lowenthal, Maldonado, Pavley, Wiggins, and Yee.
Yes. We just got that information. Thank you.
Senator Pavley, why don't you come on up? Good morning, Senator Pavley. You have one measure before us today. It's a due pass recommendation. It is SB 257. Please proceed.
Absolutely, and I'll keep this relatively brief. This builds on a law that was passed by Assemblymember Dario Fromer many years ago in 2001, and there was a requirement regarding setting aside a place for women who were breastfeeding their young children, but there was no sort of language and notification in the bill that was consistent around all state agencies. This bill narrowly focuses on alerting mothers who are getting ready to give birth to their children before they leave work, what are their rights and expectancies as far as continuing to breastfeed their children when they return to work. It relies on existing methods of communication, whether it's websites or existing brochures. There's really no additional cost. It's just clarifying for young mothers what the state policies are and what's available to them before they make a decision that may not be in the best interest of their child.
Thank you, Senator. Any witnesses in support? You want to click on right there?
Karen Farley with the California WIC Association, sponsor of the bill. And I would just add one thing to Senator Pavley, in that we have done some research, and employees are often unaware that they're able to breastfeed when they come back to work. So through other channels, we're educating mothers, and this is one way to educate employers.
Thank you very much. Any other witnesses in support? Seeing none, any witnesses in opposition? Also seeing none, DOF, do you have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have no costs associated with this bill. We're neutral.
You just hit click and enter, right? And then the communication goes out. That's no cost right there. I want to commend you, Senator Pavley. It's a very good bill. I have a few bills touching this subject. Obviously, evidence is clearly shown. There's nothing healthier than a mother's breast milk when it comes to raising your child at that age, and for developmental stage with regards to the immune system, ear infections. It's just simply nothing healthier. So I commend you for this measure. Let's call do we have a motion as well as a second We have a motion made by Mr. Torlakson. We have a second made by Mr. John Perez. Let's call a Republican roll call.
Nielsen?
Aye.
Nielsen, aye. Duval? No. Duval, no. Harkey? No. Harkey, no. Miller? Strickland?
Thank you very much, Senator Pavley. Your measure passes.
Thank you.
I saw Senator Yee. Oh, there he is, right there. He's quick.
Mr. Chair, I was hoping to maybe be able to get a vote there, that's all.
Unfortunately, he doesn't have a vote.
No, I was trying to be on the committee.
Senator Yee, you have two bills before us today. Both are due pass recommendations, SB 288 as well as SB 447. Please proceed with 288.
Thank you very much. This is 288.
We have a motion, just Mr. Yee, made by Mr. Joe Cotto, and second by Mr. Tom Torlakson. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. Knowing all of you, I feel like I'm presenting my final dissertation for exam or something like that. But this is a rather straightforward bill, Mr. Chair and members. As you know, there's a growing language minority population among the voting public in the state of California, and there are increasing efforts to try to solicit votes from those communities. And one of the things, unfortunately, that happens is that political consultants are now being hired to come up with names that may misrepresent the particular candidate, the identity. And what this bill will do is to just simply say that in those districts, in those counties, whereby translations of names are in fact used, that we establish a procedure by which that happens, pure and simple, so that no one can kind of go out there on their own and try to trump up a particular name that somehow will maybe advantage that particular candidate, but rather just to regularize the procedure by which those names are selected, and that's all it does. And with that, urge an aye vote.
Nicole Wertelman on behalf of the City and County of San Francisco in support.
Thank you very much. Any other witnesses in support? Seeing none, any witnesses in opposition? Also seeing none, do you have to have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have a concern with this bill that it would create a new general fund cost as a reimbursable mandate, but we do not have an estimate of the amount.
Okay. We have a question commentary from Senator Nielsen.
Only concern I have is how we make this reasonable for the counties. This could be some significant cost. How would we respond to the county saying, "Gee whiz, this is going to put a lot of burden on us"?
Well, let me answer it in sort of a general way, and let me then answer it in a rather specific way. I think in general, I think it's extremely important that while there may be a cost, and I think it's questionable as to how much, and I think it's a minimal cost, but this is about the integrity of our voting process. And you don't want to somehow allow a process and a procedure that's going to destroy that integrity. You don't want to manipulate individual voters, and if there are efforts and there are ways in which to do that, it seems to me that all of us in California and all of us who have some responsibility to elections are going to do whatever we can to prevent that from happening. With that said, I think that there's a minimal cost, and for those counties that utilize these bilingual ballots already, I think that it's already in place. And let me give an example. In my own jurisdiction in San Francisco, right now you can in fact have a translated transliteral name accepted in the city and county of San Francisco in our voter process. So that's already done. It's already there. I don't know. I don't think it's a reimbursable mandate on that part. It's part of the way in which we do business in San Francisco. So with that said, then the way in which the process would work based on this particular bill is that one submits a letter. One submits that name. The Department of Election looks at it. If it, in fact, is your legal name, then we'll go ahead, or legal Chinese name, you go ahead and use that. If it's not, then you want to transliterate that, you submit that. There's an appeal process that is available. If you disagree with the decision of the department, the director handles that particular appeal. That's the end of the story.
Would it be possible, though, to just include some language, which, and let me ask consultant, or he can count, the consultant can counsel, Mr. Long can make a suggestion that it would be the intent of the legislature that the counties be allowed full latitude to effect the most economic means of such communication. Just so we're acknowledging that the counties were sensitive to their fiscal plight. Is there any possible language that could convey that?
I think we can talk offline with that. I think that this is a due pass recommendation. I think this measure will move forward, but I would suggest to Mr. Yee that shortly thereafter this committee hearing that he have a conversation with Senator Nielsen.
Absolutely.
To
and Mr. Chairman, I am
he
very
has.
supportive of the bill. My wife and I have a long history of working with the Asian Pacific Islander cultures for decades, and I'm very sensitive to this particular issue. In fact, I, along with Mr. C.C. Yen, am founder of the Asian Pacific Islander American Public Affairs Association, one of whose major missions is to elicit more voter participation from Asian and Pacific Islanders. And understanding the language challenges, I believe that this would be very helpful. So I would move the bill.
Thank you.
Okay, Lika, we have 2 more questions, commentaries, and then we're going to wrap it up for this measure. Mr. John Pettis.
I'll hold off on my comments.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pettis. Thank you. Ms. Harkey?
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused on this, and I just want to know, when you, on the ballot, you would have the opportunity to have your name, right? And then would you have a second spot that would have the characters, or how?
In some jurisdictions like San Francisco, we have bilingual ballots. We have the English name, and you have your Chinese name, for example.
Okay, what about like positions? Because I see in here that it says something about titles and whatnot, ballot designations.
If you're in a particular county where because the percentage of a language minority population is hits a particular threshold based on the Federal Voting Rights Act, then you have to provide translation. So the county itself would then be translating the ballot. This bill has nothing to do with any of those. It only has to do with the issue of the name. And I think that Senator Nielsen brought up a particular point. What this bill will do is to prevent someone like myself, let's say, trying to solicit Chinese voters by saying that, well, my Chinese name is Mr. Acupuncture Supreme. That's the sort of that would be the character, that would be the understanding, and that clearly is to try and solicit Chinese voters. I have nothing to do with acupuncture. I have nothing to do with being good at acupuncture. I just got that name, and so this bill will then establish a process by which the Department of Election would in fact verify as to whether or not that's an appropriate name for you.
Okay,
Thank you, Senator.
I understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. We have a motion.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Armiano.
Yeah, I want to express my support for this, and I think Senator Yee probably remembers the time in San Francisco when they translated my name into Chinese characters, and it said Armiano Tom, and then a Asian American opponent criticized that by saying I was trying to appear to be Asian. So it's important to really watch these things and make sure that everybody's clean on them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Armiano. We have a motion that's been made by Mr. Cotto. We have a second by Mr. Torlakson. Let's call a Republican roll call.
Nielsen?
Aye.
Nielsen, aye. Duvall? Aye. Duvall, aye. Harkey? Aye. Harkey, aye. Miller? Strickland?
Mr. Yee, this measure passes. Let's go to SB 447.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And this is a rather simple sort of cleanup. Within the state of California, if you are a child organization, I'll be even shorter then.
Okay, Mr. Yee, we have a motion's been made by Mr. Duval. It's been seconded by Mr. John Pettis. You have any witnesses in support? Please proceed.
Suzanne Brown McBride from the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault in support.
Thank you.
Julie Basco with the Office of the Attorney General. We're in the sponsors. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Any other witnesses in support? Seeing none, any witnesses in opposition? Also seeing none, DOF, do you have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We do have costs and additional fee revenues that would be offsetting for this bill, about $1 million each.
Thank you very much. So we have a motion. It's been made by Mr. Duval. It's been seconded by Mr. John Pettis. This measure passes on a roll call. Thank you very much, Mr. Yee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Wiggins. Good morning, Ms. Wiggins. How are you doing?
Okay, first I'm number 2, SB 158, HPV. I'm waiving presentation, and SB 260, oil fees. I'm waiving presentation on that. Okay, so SB 2. Chairman, members.
Ms. Wiggins, bear with me one quick second. That is a candidate for suspense. Would you like to waive presentation, or would you like to present on that measure?
It's a candidate for suspense?
Yes.
Well, that's
Speak
fine
to.
with me. But I want to present.
You want to present? Okay, please proceed. Go ahead.
Okay. Chairman and members, SB 2 will allow the state's wine grape growers to continue their self-assessment to help fund the Pierce's disease glassy wing sharpshooter program in the California Department of Food and Agriculture. This program is funded primarily through federal and industry dollars. It also includes a modest contribution from the state, which has allowed the program to attract over $22 million in federal funds last year alone. This program is critical to keeping California's 61.5 wine industry healthy. I would like to turn it over to the sponsors for a few comments.
Go ahead, Ms. Cronenberg.
Chairman DeLeon, members of the committee, Paul Cronenberg on behalf of Family Winemakers, one of the co-sponsors of SB 2. As Senator Wiggins has pointed out, it's a very straightforward bill. It simply allows the Department of Food and Ag to hold a referendum of grape growers next year. A positive vote by the grape growers would extend the program for 5 years. That'll be our third shot at this beyond 2011. An extension of the program commits growers to continue funding the critical research on how to control the glassy wing sharpshooter and Pierce's disease, as well as public outreach that will help save the state's wine grapes. It also expands the program for research and public outreach on other pests and diseases that might be identified that would affect wine grapes. We think this is a proactive approach, given the experience that we've had with PD in the past for the past 8 years. We ask for your aye vote when the bill comes off suspense.
Thank you, Mr. Cronenberg. Next witness in support.
Mr. DeLeon and members, Kendra Dijogo with the Gualco Group, and on behalf of another co-sponsor of the bill, the California Association of Wine Grape Growers. By agreeing to assess themselves, growers have made a commitment to generate revenue that's leveraged with state dollars and also federal funds. Since the inception of the Pierce's Disease Board, the wine industry has raised over $30 million to help fund vital research, and that translates into practical and functional farming practices and treatment measures. The impact of Pierce's disease on the industry would amount to tens of billions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of jobs statewide, and we urge your aye vote to have this bill come off suspense.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Seeing none. Any witnesses in opposition? Also seeing none. DOF, do you have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have no position. We note that we currently spend $4.2 million general fund on this program each year.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, SB 2. Why don't we go, Senator Wiggins, with SB 215,
Okay.
which is a due pass recommendation
All right.
dealing with LAFCOs.
Now this is
We have a
SB
motion,
215.
Senator Wiggins. We have a motion. It's been made by Mr. Cotto.
thank you.
It's been seconded by Mr. Torlakson. Witnesses in support? Are you a witness in support?
Only here to answer questions, Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
But do you support, or you just want to answer questions?
I work for the Senate Local Government Committee. I'm helping the staff.
Okay. None? Any witnesses in opposition? Also seeing none, do you have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have no costs associated with this bill.
Repeat that one more time, I'm sorry.
No costs, Mr. Chairman.
Just roll call.
Okay. We have a motion that's been made by Mr. Joe Cotto. It's been seconded by Mr. Torlakson. Let's call a Republican roll call.
Nielsen?
Aye.
Nielsen, aye. Duvall? Harkey? Harkey, no. Miller? Miller, no. Strickland?
Okay, Senator Wiggins, this measure passes. Let's go to SB 670.
Okay.
Okay. Gotcha.
670. Well, I think I'm doing SB 215.
You just did Senator 215. We're going to go to 670.
SB 670 would put a temporary. This is SB 670. SB
Move the bill.
670 would put
Senator
a temporary.
Wiggins, we just have a motion made by Mr. Solorio. It's been seconded by Mr. Torlakson, and there's a subset, section B, if you will, second by Mr. John Perez. Your witness is in support.
Okay. SB 670 would put a temporary moratorium on motorized suction dredge mining in California rivers until the Department of Fish and Game finishes its court-ordered overhaul of regulations. This temporary ban will save the Department of Fish and Game money that can be redirected to core priorities. The department itself says it needs $1.26 million to run this program, but takes in only $175,000 in permit fees. A moratorium on motorized dredging means the department won't have the overhead costs of processing and issuing dredging permits, and it spares game wardens from having to check each permit over the 3,000 recreational dredgers in the field. This is not a ban on gold mining. People can still seek a gold through panning and other techniques that don't cause such damage to rivers and streams.
Thank you, Senator Wiggins. The witness is in support.
David Quintana on behalf of the California Tribal Business Alliance. We are, and all of our member tribes are proud to be the sponsors of this bill. We look for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Quintana. Next witness in support.
My name is Bob Goodwin. I'm a self-governance coordinator, also a tribal member of the Kuduk tribe, also a member of the California Association of Tribal Governments, 25 members that are in support of this SB 670 as well. The Kuduk tribe is on the mid-river region of the Klamath River with over 3,500 enrolled members. Salmon and steelhead, lamprey are all very important to our people. We haven't had the opportunity to fish for subsistence in the past few years. Our tribal fishery last year, we only recovered about 100 fish. Historically, numbers in the Klamath River used to be about 1 million fish returning annually. Today, if we see runs of 10% of that, we're very lucky. Again, I'd like to reiterate that this is, in our opinion, it's going to save the state of California money. It costs the state of California between $1.2 and $1.5 million just to regulate this industry, and it only brings in, through permit fees, about $175,000 to $200,000 a year. The American Sports Fishing Alliance has made a report that there were 23,000 unemployed commercial and sports fishermen related jobs that are people that are unemployed that have had an impact of about $1.5 billion to the state of California. The Kuduk tribe and the California Association of Tribal Governments strongly urges your support for this.
Thank you very much. Next witness in support.
Izzy Martin with the Sierra Fund. Due to our concerns about the impact of suction dredge technology on mercury dispersal and atomization, we urge your aye vote on this bill.
Thank you. Next witness. Mr. Panay.
Mr. Chairman, members, Josh Panay on behalf of the Morongo Band of Mission Indians, we'd like to urge your look at the $1.8 million savings that this bill would bring to the general fund and urge your aye vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Panay. Next witness in support.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Jerome Encinas with California Nations Indian Gaming Association.
for all the support. We support all the tribes that are here and the arguments that have been given. Thank you for your support.
Thank you very much. Assembly member. Good morning.
Morning. Chair, members, Phil Eisenberg, Sequan Band, Kumeyaay Nation, based in San Diego, in support.
Thank you very much, Assemblymember Eisenberg. Any other witnesses in support? Seeing none. Witnesses in opposition? Can we allow them? Yes, you have to get up. Thank you. Please proceed. Witnesses in opposition.
Assemblywomen, my name is Patrick Keene, and I'm part of a third-generation family-owned business that has been serving the mining community for the past 60 years. I'd like to thank the Assembly members for the opportunity to speak here and give a business owner's point of view how SB 670 would directly affect Keene Engineering plus 25 small businesses in the state of California, which serve the prospectors and dredge mining community. 40% of our business relies on California small and medium-scale dredge miners and people who travel from out of state to come to our Golden State. SB 670 is a prohibition and will cause economic harm to our industry to the tune of $60 million and add further injury to our current economic situation in California. Not only our industry would be in danger of collapse, but many other different types as well. The suction dredge community supports businesses in gold-bearing areas which would be in danger of failure. Many jobs, in all probability, would be lost if 670 passes. Since most of these businesses are seasonal, campgrounds, hotels, restaurants, service stations, grocery stores that are located in economically depressed areas, business owners rely on such things as small suction dredgers, prospectors, and their tourism. Many of the counties in Northern California are economically hard hit as we speak. Passing SB 670 would greatly add to their economic suffering. Californians and people from other states come to California and spend an average of $3,200 per month in local economies. Please allow the court system and the environmental impact report to determine the impact, if any, before allowing SB 670 to shut down our industry, which will cost California's tax base and violate congressionally protected property rights. The original litigation from the Karuk tribe against the Department of Fish and Game and suction dredging, as well as Governor Schwarzenegger's determined that suction dredging should continue under the old regulations until the Department of Fish and Game has the opportunity to complete a new environmental impact report and promulgate new dredging regulations. Therefore, we ask California State Assembly Appropriations Committee to vote no on SB 670. And we also employ 35 people ourselves.
All right, thank you. Next witness in opposition. Someone step up to the mic. Go right ahead, sir.
My name is Gerald Hobbs. I'm with Public Lands for the People. We have approximately 40,000 constituent members, most of the miners that are here in Southern California and in Northern California and other states. One of the things I'd like to address today to the Assembly, and I appreciate the time to speak, is the fact that there's a lot of misinformation out here on the environmental issues. The great damage that dredging does and things like that. There are a lot of benefits to suction dredging, and most of the misinformation on suction dredging has to do with things like covering spawning beds up with tailings. That's theoretically impossible. First of all, the Department of Fish and Game regulates the suction dredge community out of the rivers during these spawning seasons. So once the fish have spawned and hatched, then they allow the dredging community to go in and dredge. So there's not much danger of that. Destroying the fish food, the biota and the taxa. There's several scientific studies, which I have with me, some 25 studies from 9 different scientists, biologists, and doctorates, which state that even during the times of dredging, the biota and taxa are eaten by the fish as they come out of the end of the dredge, and are short, and the damage to the area that's dredged is short-term, local, and is usually recovered within 30 to 45 days. The temperature, water temperatures. Water temperature, the science says, little if any impact to the temperature. Turbidity. There's studies here from doctors that state that the turbidity is actually good for the fish. Safety and protection, for one thing. They get the food out of the turbidity. They did tests where they had fish that were in tanks in heavily turbid water.
Yes, sir. I'm going to ask you to conclude right now, because I don't want to keep this this to be ongoing. We have several more witnesses here.
All right.
I'm going to ask you to taper down your comments and conclude.
The other thing that we do beneficial is we take out lead and mercury out of the rivers. Toxic lead and mercury and heavy metals.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next witnesses, and let's try to keep it as brief as possible. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Dunn. We own a gold mining supply shop in Concord, California. Last year we did about $600,000 in business, and this year we're gasping for air. Our sales are down 70% simply because this bill is in circulation. Miners do not want to buy a piece of equipment that's going to become illegal to use if this bill passes. And we've, just on a personal note, when I was 17, my husband took me on my first date and we went gold dredging. We've raised our babies. We've done the entire thing for 30 years. I have business letters here.
15. That's okay.
Could I read a few? A paragraph?
Go ahead.
I'll be brief.
Go right ahead, please.
We have several business letters here in my same condition. We own a wholesale manufacturing company. We're in Hesperia, California, been in business 5 years. If SB 670 passes, we're going to lose 50 to 70% of our business. To make matters worse, our 200 California dealers would suffer the same economic blow in each of their businesses, compounding the economic harm in their communities. If 670 passes...
I don't want to keep going to the list. I think we got the spirit
Thank
alert. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next witness.
Hi, Cindy Hillary, Regional Council of Rural Counties. From an economic perspective, a lot was made by the supporters of this bill about the savings to the state. I want to talk a little bit about just the losses to the state. This is millions of dollars of enterprise that comes into the state from out of the state. It also infuses money into the very poorest counties in California that are really on the very, very edge economically. This is sales tax revenue to those counties, especially Siskiyou County is one of the counties that would be hardest hit by this. The suction dredge gold mining in their district is the difference between Siskiyou County staying alive and not. So this is not a shoulder issue or a side issue. This is a very big economic driver in certain rural counties in California.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Our file indicates that there probably would not be the same level of savings people have quoted, mainly because we would anticipate Fish and Game would continue to have to enforce the law, and the enforcement costs are a substantial portion of any savings.
Okay, do we have any questions,
Mr.
commentaries?
I'll be real brief.
I'm going to ask you to be extremely brief.
Really brief.
Yes.
Pete Conity, representing the new 49ers, a gold mining company. I think your analysis got it correct, that there's only a $50,000 cost to the state to administer this program. Your analysis is correct. The figure that's being thrown around by about 1.1 million or 1.8 million is not a correct figure. That's the cost of the EIR that the legislature has already appropriated, and the EIR isn't in effect. Number two, what I passed around is a Trout Unlimited in Minnesota is using suction dredge mining, a suction dredge, to create mining or habitat for fish in Minnesota. Now, this is the same thing they're trying to outlaw in California. So their claims that this is harmful to fish don't always square with the actual facts, and one of their own organizations is using this equipment. Lastly, The mines are assessed by counties based on value. These mining claims, which are private property rights, are assessed by the counties. If you pass this bill, those claims will become valueless and the counties will lose all those assessments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have a question commentary from Senator Nielsen.
Okay.
We have a question.
We appreciate your interest in this legislation. It really affects the area that I represent, but it does affect a very important industry in California, a historic industry, an industry that was a pioneer to the economic prosperity of this country, this state at least, and surely a continuing economic factor. And I do believe that has got to be respected. My position in this has been that the dredging could continue and their CEQA review would proceed and would deal with the results thereafter. It's very difficult for me because it's a part of the district that I represent, and I have friends on both sides of the issue who feel very passionately about this. And again, I would reiterate my position that I think the mining and dredging industry is very important in California and should be protected. I would hope that friends on both sides might be able to continue to discuss and reach some kinds of agreements and compromises. In terms of the bill today, I'm just going to intend to abstain from the vote, and I'm not trying to duck a vote. I'm trying to put myself in a position to work with both sides in this thing, that something more down the way can be reasonable. I don't think the cessation of the mining until the CEQA review is the right way to go in the bill, but in the spirit of trying to be working with the parties to see if we can't reach some kind of reasonable compromise. I know the clock's running out and it's moving out of the Appropriations Committee to the floor, but I'm of mind that reasonable minds can prevail, and maybe there is something common here. Both sides need to be respected, and my abstention is in respect of the interests of both parties.
Thank you very much, Ms.
And
Senator.
to leverage myself to be able to work between them to reach some reasonable accommodations.
Thank you, Senator Nielsen. We have...
I took amendments to the bill, and the amendments clarify that those who use suction dredge mining for non-mining purposes, such as reservoir operators, are not subject to this bill. Also, that the non-motorized forms of gold mining are not included in the ban. So that's it.
Thank you, Senator Wiggins. We have a motion that's been made by Mr. Cotto. It's been seconded by Mr. Torlakson. Let's call a Republican roll call.
Nielsen?
Not voting.
Duvall? Not voting. Yes. Harkey? Harkey, aye. Miller? Strickland? Strickland, aye.
Senator Nielsen, I hope that both parties can continue to work together. This measure passes. Let's go to your final bill, which is SB 778.
Okay. So this is on call.
Okay.
It's passed.
Yes, it passes. Yes. Okay. We're gonna do 778 now.
Okay. Now, this is SB 778.
Motion, guys.
Move the bill.
We have Senator Wiggins. We have a motion by Mr. Solorio. It's been seconded by Mr. John Perez. Do you have any witnesses in support? I see none. Witnesses in opposition? I also see none. DOF, do you have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We have revenues of up to $346,000 due to the fishing game fund.
Thank you very much. The motion has been made as well as second. Your measure passes on an A roll call. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day, Ms. Wiggins. Bye-bye. You can leave now, Ms. Wiggins. Thank you. Senator Carol Liu.
That's Wiggins.
Which one is it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. I ask for your support for SJR 2. This resolution commends Congress and the President of the United States for including the American Opportunity Tax Credit in the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. The Act provides financial relief to students and their families from the soaring costs of college education, including textbook purchases. The U.S. Government Accounting Office found that between December 1986 and December 2004, textbook prices nearly tripled while tuition and fees increased by 240%. Given that nearly half of undergraduate graduates nationwide receive state and federal financial aid, efforts to make the overall cost of attendance more affordable, including the cost of textbooks, makes economic sense for California and the nation. This resolution also calls for the state of California, when the state's economic conditions improve, to adopt a similar higher ed tax credit measure, and I ask for your support.
Thank you, Senator Liu. Witnesses in support.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and committee members, Bonnie Slauson representing the Community College League. And I would just like to start by commending Senator Liu and Assemblymember Solario for their efforts to help lower the costs and try to contain the costs for textbooks for our students. The League has worked hard at the federal level to expand this federal tax law to include the cost of textbooks for our students, and we were successful to be able to get that in this year, and hopefully it'll help our students have more affordable higher education. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support also, Chair?
Hello, Mallory Angeli with the Post-Secondary Education Commission in support of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other more witnesses in support? Seeing none. Any witnesses in opposition? Also seeing none. I know this is a Senate joint resolution, but do you have to have a file?
No file, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Liu. We will take into consideration, and our offices will work closely together.
Thank you very much, members.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Maldonado. Senator Maldonado, you have two measures before us today. One is on consent, and one is a due pass recommendation. That is SB 5 with regards to post. Please make your presentation.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll be very brief. SB 5 requires the Commission of Peace Officer Standards and Training, also known as POST, to complete a feasibility study regarding peace officer status for members of a fire department based, thank you very much. This measure was passed unanimously from the Assembly Public Safety Committee.
Unanimously?
Unanimously.
That's
Thanks
the
for
word,
your help,
unanimously.
Mr. Chairman. I'll tell staff not to write that word anymore in here.
Too many syllables.
Yes, for me it is. But I ask for an aye vote, Mr. Chair. I think Christy Baumer.
Thank you very much, Senator Maldonado. Witnesses in support.
Mr. Chair, members, Christy Baumer representing the California Professional Firefighters, sponsors of the bill, in support.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Seeing none. Witnesses in opposition. Also seeing none. Do you have to have a file?
Yes, we have no cost associated with this bill, or the cost would be reimbursed. Right.
Okay, thank you very much. I think there was a motion that was made by Mr. Amiano. It was seconded by Mr. Duval. We're going to call a Democratic roll call.
De Leon? Amiano? Calderon? Poto? Davis? Fuentes? Hall? John Perez? Skinner? Solario? Torlixon?
I think maybe the Republicans ought to go no, too. What do you think?
Mr. Ivo Maldonado, let's put this measure on hold for right now, and then we'll move it forward. Let's come up and speak with some of the colleagues right now.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go. Next one. Ms. Hancock. Just slip.
Morning.
Ms. Hancock, good morning. You have a 387 for us today. It's a due pass recommendation with regards to the Secretary of State. Please present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. SB 387 is a common sense measure that would end the practice of rejecting ballots if voters doodle, make extraneous remarks, or write their name on them. In the days before electronic voting, there were issues around identification marks on ballots that could lead to voter identification and vote selling. That just is not the case anymore. And
we have a motion. It's been made by Mr. Amiano. It's been seconded by
Mr. With me is the Secretary
John Pettis,
of State's office.
Secretary of State, Representative Secretary of State. Please
Thank you,
State your case.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Rhonda Pascal on behalf of Secretary of State Deborah Bowen, the sponsor of this measure. Again, members, this will ensure that voters are not disenfranchised if there are harmless, inadvertent marks on the ballot where the voter's intent is clear. Happy to answer any questions. Respectfully urge the committee's support.
Okie dokie. I'll get there, Ms. Harkey. Any witnesses in opposition? See none. DOF, do you have a file?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We found that the bill would create a reimbursable state mandate, but the cost would be minor, and we are neutral on the bill.
Okay, thank you very much. Question from Ms. Harkey.
I'm confused on reading the analysis on this. Are you stating that if, in fact, there is an extraneous mark on the ballot, that it still gets counted?
That's right. It gets segregated and remade and counted.
You mean under the provisions of the bill or under current law?
Under current law now they get tossed out, do they not?
That is correct. And so under the provisions of the bill, if there is an extraneous mark on the ballot but the voter's intent is clear, that ballot would in fact be counted.
Okay, I had a personal experience with this in an election where numerous ballots were thrown out because of a little widget or a check or a, go Diane or something else. And so quite honestly, I support this. I think that, unless there's, I think we have ways to remediate fraud, but if, a lot of people scribble and they think they're doing a nice thing.
Exactly.
and
right.
I lost an election over these little things. So I'm not feeling very kindly about not supporting this. I would like to support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Harkey. We have a motion that's been made by Mr. Amiano and Mr. John Pettis. This measure passes on a B roll call. Thank you very much. You're up? Okay. B roll call with Ms. Harkey up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, at whatever time would be appropriate, I think we could lift the call on SB 5.
Would you like to lift a call? Are you sure?
If you'd be so kind, sir.
I want to make sure if you feel convinced or that your concerns were alleviated and that you feel fine.
They were. I appreciate that.
Okay. Sounds good. We will lift the call on SB 5. That is Mr. Abel Maldonado, the King Rancher from Santa Maria. We will pass this on an A roll call. Thank you very much. Now, we have a couple senators left here before us today. That's Senator Onestad. That is Ms. Lowenthal. Mr. Lowenthal, I should say. Okay. I will go down and present for, well, actually, I'm missing my vice chair. He'll be here in a couple minutes. If I can get Mr. Onestad and Mr. Lowenthal down here. I know that Mr. Nielsen will present from Ms. Alquist. Mr. Solorio will present from Ms. Ducheney. Mr. Solorio is ready. Or Ms. Denise Moreno Ducheney. Mr. Solorio.
Thank you, Chair and members. This bill would prioritize foster youth and other at-risk youth for admission into the California Conservation Corps. As you know, the Corps is a work, service, training, and development program. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you very much. We have a motion that's been made by Mr. Amiano. It's been seconded by Ms. Skinner. We're going to call a Republican roll call.
Nielsen?
Ducheney.
Duvall? Harkey? Miller? Miller, no. Strickland? Strickland, aye.
Senate Bill 309. Ducheney's
The bill is Senator Denise Moreno Ducheney, which was the bill that was articulated before Mr. Solorio made his presentation. Nothing has changed. There's been no sleight of hand.
Harkey and Duvall, aye. Harkey, Duvall, aye.
Okay, this bill passes. Mr.
Thank you.
Nielsen, for Ms. Alquist, we only have a few authors, and then we're done. We'll go to consent, and we're done. Mr. Nielsen, for Ms. Alquist, again, I'm going to call Mr. Lowenthal and Mr. Anistad.
Mr. Chairman and members, I'm honored to be able to present this measure for Senator Alquist. Both of us have a long history of being sensitive to and trying to protect society from sex offenders, and particularly the repeat sex offenders.
Move the bill.
We have a motion that's been made by Mr. Jumpetis. It has been seconded by Mr. Duval. Witnesses in support.
The measure, it's clarifying, is for related to the state authorized assessment tool. The intent is that that tool be used to the highest level of accuracy. In dealing with sex offenders, it is very complicated, and one has to be very sensitive to all kinds of issues. As one of the proponents, in fact, as chairman of the Board of Prison Terms, drafted what's called the Sexually Violent Predator Law. And even after the drafting that law in successive years, we fine-tuned that law to protect us from legal vulnerabilities. There are those who represent sex offenders who are very litigious and have challenged many, many different statutes. Senator Alquist was actually the author of this tool in 2006. It was one of her bills. It was created to assess risks of sex offenders to society for those who are on parole and probation. There are tools to continue sex offenders in treatment. The Sexually Violent Predator Act is one. A civil commitment that can result in 2 years of continued commitment. But due to the nature of sex offenders, it is very, very important to have all of the tools available to you so you can identify, know if they are continuing risks of danger to society, and do something about it. This bill ensures risk assessment records are available to the experts, the state authorized assessment tool experts, and gives them some overriding authority to the scores. It requires probation to assess registered sex offenders at sentencing. It's what's called their probation officer's report. Mr. Chairman, do I need to shorten this?
Yeah, we're going to wind down.
Why don't we wind down?
I think this is going to be an A-roll call.
The point is, build in provisions that allow the most accurate and thorough assessment of the risk of danger to society, and that's what this bill does.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you very much for your eloquent statement. This is an issue that you have a lot of background and experience with, and I know that through our working together in the conference committee, I've learned some stuff. I've gained some insight from you. So why don't we go to witnesses in support?
Janet Neely, Deputy Attorney General and AG's representative to the State Risk Assessment Committee. We sponsored this bill.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Mr. Chairman and members, Jack Wallace, Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, and we support the bill.
Thank you very much.
Suzanne Brown McBride, California Coalition Against Sexual Assault. I'm also chair of the California Sex Offender Management Board. Both bodies are in support of the legislation.
Thank you very much. Other witnesses in support? Ma'am, are you witness in support? No? Okay. Okay. Witnesses in opposition. Seeing none, do you have to have a file?
No file, Mr.
Okay, we have a motion that's been made by Mr. John Pettis. It's been seconded by Mr. Mike Duvall. This measure passes on a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And
Mr. Senator Nielsen, would you like to present Mr. Anastad's bill? No, that's okay. We'll hold it over okay, we'll do it right now, and then we got one more, and then we are done.
Mr. Chairman and members, this is a bill by Senator Onnested, and
move the bill.
We have a motion that's been made by Mr. John Pettis, been seconded by Mr. Mike Duvall. I see no witnesses in support, and I see no witnesses in opposition. Do you have to have a file?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure which bill we're on.
Okay, we are on SB 286.
Scientific collector permits.
We have a motion nonetheless, as well as a second, and this measure passes on a roll call. Thank you very much, Senator. I appreciate it. Senator, if you could be so kind enough to come up and chair the committee. I'm going to present one last bill. That'd be Senator Kehoe, Chair of Appropriations on the Senate side.
Which bill is it?
This is Senator Kehoe's claims bill.
Okay. Yes, this is the normal claims bill. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman? It's a standard every year. Please proceed.
Good morning, members.
Move the bill.
Second.
Second. Moved and second. Solario, and it was Duvall, I believe, second. Finance?
We support the bill.
Okay. It's moved and seconded. Any support?
Gary Longhome, Victim Comp Board. We're the sponsors of the bill.
Okay, very good. Any opposition? I would expect none. Then it would be on an A roll call.
Thank you very much,
Mr.
Senator. Thank you.
I'm sorry, this is something's wrong. This it's on 149. This information is wrong. Okay. I'm looking at it.
I think that's an internal caucus matter.
Don't slip anything by Duvall.
We respect the separation of church and state, therefore we won't interfere or involve ourselves in those internal matters. Members, we are done for today. I need a motion as well as a second for our consent file. We have a motion that's been made by Mr. Amiano. It's been seconded by Mr. Duvall. We have 33 measures before us today on the consent file. This passes on an A roll call. We have finalized our work for today. Thank you, members. Our committee is adjourned.